fermer la porte, ma chérie, parce que je suis en réunion Zoom. Je donne une intervention.
Okay, I think we can start, and then I will be letting people in as they arrive. So welcome to everyone to this 7th lecture of this forum. And I'm really pleased to have with us today Dr. Malika Hamidi, a very well-known Islamic feminist in the context of France and Europe. And I will hand on over to Hatoun, first of all, to introduce the series briefly, and then I will introduce Malika to you. Over to you, Hatoun.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm also very happy to have you all with us on board. I'm sure that many of you have already seen and followed those who follow our series know about the concept of it, but for those who are just joining us, it's important to just give you a brief of it. So it's all about exploring the imagination and the representation of women in all three areas of history, or in arts and in literature. As you know that today the MENA region and the work of women in art and literature and history and archaeology and social sciences, they are a bit on the margin of what is going in the MENA or Western Asia and North Africa. So this series will include speakers from the region as well as from other parts of the globe. It points out to, or these speakers will point out to their research on women of the region through their multi and interdisciplinary, distinctive, innovative, and creative approaches to their fields. They will be deconstructing the stereotypes of Muslim women and emphasize their diversity. So this is part of what we are looking for. The series, which is envisaged as a platform for debate among academics, students, and the general public, with interest in the broader theme of women and gender in the MENA region, started on the 1st of December 2021 and will run until the end of the academic year of 2022. The organizers are both Professor Zahia Salhi, the chair of Modern Arabic Studies, and myself as a visiting senior researcher at the University of Manchester. We are both happy to invite you to engage in the women and gender discussion, and it's to you. The floor is yours, Zahia, to present our speaker.
Thank you very much, Hatoun. It's really a great pleasure and a great honor to have with us Malika Hamidi, who is currently a postdoctoral researcher at the Catholic University of Leuven in the framework of the Affect Research Impact Assessment of Belgian de-radicalization policies upon social cohesion and liberties under the direction of Professor Fabienne Briand. Malika is also a research associate at the CESIR of the Saint-Louis University in Brussels and the Laboratoire d'analyse des sociétés et pouvoirs Afrique, Diaspora, of the Gaston Berger University of Saint-Louis of Senegal. She specializes in Muslim feminism in Europe. Her publications include a monograph titled Muslim Feminism and Why Not, and a co-authored book titled Islamic Feminisms, in plural, published by La Fabrique in 2012. She has a forthcoming book that is titled Muslim Feminism Revolution, which is like the title of our lecture today, Decolonization, Agency, and Politicization. It will be prefaced by Professor Amina Wadoud. She's currently supervising the first anthology on intersection et encroisement, féministe musulmane, afroféminisme, complice et allié, together with Fabienne Briand, Françoise Berger, and Christine Delphi. This collective book is based on the first international symposium held on this topic at the Université Libre de Bruxelles in April 2018 and is prefaced by Professor Angela Davis. Malika has also co-directed the European project European Values for Primary School under the Erasmus Plus program, European Commission for Brussels. And since 2020, she has been an opinion marker at the Brussels time. Without further ado, I'm very happy to pass on the floor to Malika. Thank you, Malika, and it's all yours now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Is that fine? Okay, great. To begin with, I would like to thank you so much again, Zahia and Hatun, for this invitation. As a postdoctoral researcher now, I'm focusing on another topic. I'm focusing on the impact of the anti-terrorist measures on the Muslim communities here in Belgium after the terrorist attack. So it is completely different. And well, it is linked, by the way, it's linked to the question and the education of Muslim women. Still, I'm happy to come back and to share with you my researches on European Muslim feminists in the West. I focused on that topic during my PhD. I interviewed, I think, around between 40 and 60 women who claim to be Muslim and feminist at a time where the political context would say that it is completely contradictory to identify oneself to be as a Muslim and feminist. Again, in the French-speaking part of Europe, I don't know if here this evening we have some people who are in France and Belgium, but this is really a complex political context with regard to the visibility of religiosity within the public space. So you can imagine when some women come and claim for liberation through a religious framework, it completely, it seems to be completely contradictory. And this is why I decided, I remember I was part of a symposium in 2006 at the UNESCO. And this is when I met with Margot Badran, Amina Wadoud, and all those scholar activists, by the way, who impacted my views and my intellectual insights, and that were much more than that. There were women like Ziba Mir Husseini, Asma Lamrabet for the French-speaking part of Europe. So many intellectual figures that nourished my views, my analysis, and that constructed the framework of my PhD. I remember that when I shared that panel, the moderator was Alain Grèche, the former director of Le Monde Diplomatique, and he was struggling so much for the rights of Muslim women to do what they want with their own body. They were not defending the headscarf. But in 2004, you know, we had that law which prohibited the headscarf at school. So it was pushing Muslim women in the private sphere. They wanted to liberate them, but they pushed them in the private sphere. And for the first time in the history of feminism, the right of education was attacked. And this is when we had you know, some intellectuals, some high-profile feminists like Christine Delphi, for example, in France, who struggled side by side to struggle against that law. And Alain Grèche was part of that. He was part of that struggle. And when he moderated the panel at the UNESCO in 2006 on existe-t-il un féminisme musulman? Does an Islamic feminist exist? It was the topic of that symposium. At the end of the panel, it told me and it advised me to write a PhD on the topic. And he said, look, Malika, the scientific approach of that topic is crucial, and especially in France. So I did my PhD under the supervision of Farhad Khosrow-Kavar. Maybe some of you knows him. And now I want to share with you some results of my researches. So I published the first part of my PhD, Un féminisme musulman et pourquoi pas, a Muslim feminism and why not? And the title, I wanted to pay tribute to Christine Delphi, because Christine Delphi, you know, when she was struggling with us, one day at the symposium, she said, now there is a link between Islam and feminism, a Muslim feminism, and why not? You know, and once she did that, when she pronounced that sentence, you just cannot imagine the French-speaking mainstream feminist movement being so so angry towards a figure like Christine Delphi, friend of Simone de Beauvoir, justifying a link between Islam and feminism. So it was really, really courageous. It was really courageous to pronounce that sentence. And I wanted to pay tribute to Christine Delphi by giving that title to my first book, which is the theoretical part of my PhD. And now the second part is about to be published in October or November by Peter Lang, international publisher, and Amina Wadoud was very nice to write a preface. So I hope that the name will be Muslim Feminism Revolution. And I really hope that people will understand how in the French-speaking part of Europe, the European Muslim feminists identified themselves and mobilized themselves at the socio-political level. And I will come back on that book on the special case of Iran. And I will focus on the Musawa movement. I present the initiative of the Musawa movement, which is really interesting for the French-speaking part of Europe. So it will be published in October 2020. So coming to our topic, as I said, it is clear today that a number of Muslim women activists are really projecting themselves and becoming part of a feminist movement through their identification with Islam. And actually, this new generation of Muslim women, they no longer wish to be seen as a minority aspiring to be recognized in civil society, but they really want, to be recognized as subject of their history, of their memory, alongside other women with whom they share actually similar struggles. So it's in 2000, yeah, that in the French-speaking part of Europe, a new Muslim female subject emerged. They aspire, to process of liberation in the language of religiosity first. It's with their faith that they were struggling in the civil society, and then with a feminist perspective after having that debate within the Muslim community. I remember when we had, when I interviewed those Muslim activists, it was really important to see how it was complex, to reconcile themselves as Muslim and feminist, because feminism was, for them in their subconscious, feminism was a movement against Islam. And they would mention, the civilized mission of feminism at the beginning of the 20th century in Algeria, in Morocco, especially in Algeria, So it was difficult for them to identify themselves as a feminist. And at the same time, for the feminists, it was difficult to accept that you can be a Muslim, wearing a hijab and claiming for liberation as you are, as you are wearing the symbol of oppression. So it was a long debate, and I spent my time saying that still in 2021, in the French-speaking part of Europe, Muslim women still have to justify how to become a Muslim and feminist, which is completely amazing when we compare our situation to the English-speaking part of the world, where being a Muslim and feminist is completely, I mean, it is acted. We have an agreement, if I can say that into bracket. No need to justify again and again, but in the French-speaking part, you know, that sacro-sainte laïcité, I don't know how to translate it, because I think there is no translation of the concept of laïcité, which is really struggling against the visibility of the religion in the public sphere. It is really, I speak about an exclusivist and a radical and extremist view of the concept of laïcité, which is normally, for us, the laïcité should accept all the visibility of all religion. But when we speak about laïcité in France, it's difficult to accept that dimension. So the appearance of this feminine religiosity is taking place in pain and under tension, given the socio-political context in 2004, when the law against the headscarf was voted in France. And after 9/11, we are witnessing the beginning of a media and political relentlessness against Islam, with the question of Muslim women who is taken hostage on the political debate, but also in the Islamic discourse. And this is exactly that visibility which is going to undermine the process, because by being actors of their own history, these Muslim feminist figures deconstruct social representation and stereotypes, and the capacity to act, referring to Sabah Mahmoud, may peace be upon her soul, that characterizes them has allowed the debate to be nuanced. And this is what Christine Delphi said. Indeed, those women are going to struggle against sexism within their own history, deconstructing the cultural and sexist interpretation of some verses, and they are going to struggle against racism and the multiple discriminations of which they are victims in European societies, and especially Islamophobia, which is still very visible in France and Belgium. And I really think that things are getting worse and worse. Fortunately, we are still positive. And I often say that movement of Muslim women who are now being involved, you know, in the modest fashion, in sports, in arts, all those women who are more and more visible in those areas is deconstructing Islamophobia, because you are facing some women who are no longer wishes or want to justify, to say, look, I'm Muslim and I feel free. They don't want, but they act, and they are involved in some areas of the society where we don't expect them to be, actually. So by positioning themselves as feminists and Muslims, they are considered as political subordinates, because actually they are refusing the borders which are imposed to them, within the Muslim community and within the civil society. So I think that the articulation between Muslim religiosity and the desire to be an actor, we will linger on the way in which these Muslim feminists, their relationship to feminism through an identification with Islam, which will lead us to address the question of the contour of the process of a hybrid identity affirmation in religious speech, and more particularly the emergence of a Muslim feminist identity in French-speaking Europe as a strategy of emancipation. You know, the question of this hybrid process of identity is crucial, especially in our multicultural societies, and it reveals a quest for identity and the redefinition through religion, especially among Muslim and feminist activists in Francophone Europe. I think that changes related to the stature and role of women are beginning to take place among European women of the Muslim faith, and in parallel to this, belonging to Islam acts as one of the major parameters in the construction of the identity. We have to highlight that. In a secularized context, such as in France or Belgium, it is really interesting to analyze the identity construction of Muslim women. And in this field, the sociological research in the French-speaking world aimed at shedding light and focusing on this process in Western societies is rather recent and increasingly thorough. In recent years, we have some researchers who have begun to take an interest in this new, what they call this new educated and claiming female model, which must be studied in terms of identity from a sociological viewpoint. In France and Belgium, we find that the most common objection to the religious affiliation of Muslim women is the wearing of the Islamic headscarf, which is, again, as I said, synonymous with subjugation and oppression. In their case, when I interviewed the Muslim feminists in France, Belgium, and some in Canada and Switzerland, the adoption of the headscarf is one of affirming their mode of belonging to Muslim religion. Thus, although the framework of the construction of this identity, as it is inscribed in the Muslim tradition, constitute a starting point. The other parameters constituting this identity will pass through the efforts and struggles to be carried out in order to be inscribed in the modern condition by claiming the right to be recognized as a feminist in its own right. And this is indeed a break with the traditional predefined role of the Muslim women and the political and feminist awareness in the European society that are now theirs. So we can highlight the fact that a certain number of young European women of the Muslim faith demobilize the religious referent as a strategy to escape the two spaces in which the family environment and civil society try to lock them up. So they will go through the construction of a strong Muslim female first identity to access modernity. And today, this is through the debates of society that we observe a tendency to contest this dynamic in movement led by those women who fully assume their belonging to French or Belgian society, the Islamity and the wish to be recognized as feminists. Thus, a women's movement supported by European governments will come to oppose those of these activists of the Muslim faith. This being said, these debates, although they bring female actors to the forefront of the stage, remain superficial and little publicized. Indeed, its exceptionality is increasingly claimed by these women activists whose capacity for action and reflexivity is no longer confined to the Muslim community, but it is extended to the feminist movement, and this is the problem. The normalization in recent years of the presence of Muslim women in the media and the public sphere has actually facilitated the taking of political position in social debates, and even the mobilization in the Muslim world, in the Arabic world after the revolution, deconstruct the image of those women wearing the headscarf. So for the French-speaking part of Europe in the media, it was so astonished to see, and I remember having debates with some feminists here saying, wow, we have Muslim women wearing black headscarf and marching and claiming for justice and rights. For us, it is so powerful to see how they are deconstructing actually that image of a Muslim woman who is actually that we actually imagined as being oppressed and submitted. So with this visibility and this capacity to act in European civil society, it would seem that the veil no longer represents this marker of identity that has long been a marker of the Muslim women's identity. And it is only the way to objectify and freeze the Islamic female identity in the debate. So the elaboration of that feminist rhetoric, into brackets, is the fruit of a desire to see the normalization of the presence of these Muslim women in all spheres of society, combined with a Muslim feminist identity, which is now assumed. And for this reason, the engagement of Muslim women activists in feminist movement as agents of change claiming Islam seems promising as a way out of the clash of sclerotic ideas about the existence of a Muslim feminist identity. In France, actually, the stormy debates around the controversial issue of the Islamic headscarf have, on the one hand, divided the feminist movement. And on the other hand, they have highlighted the racist and colonialist overtones of the discourse held by certain intellectual activists unconsciously or consciously influenced by the colonial past of their country, which also guides their ideas, but also their relationships to European women descended from immigrants from former colonies. And it is in this context that a challenging and counter-current phenomenon emerges, first in France and then in Belgium. We faced a collective of Muslim women activists engaged in an Islamic and feminist perspective at the same time. It was the beginning of a new rhetoric, of a new way of challenging Islamophobia. So the tone was set, feminist and Muslim women, and why not? And it is thus through numerous associative commitments and involvement from the field to the academic and political world, it's important to say that a generation of women of the Muslim faith was empowered and is becoming more and more visible on the political and the media scene. So they appeared to be as actors of change, and they were armed theoretically, politically, intellectually, and they were unexpected and disturbing, and they were disturbing a certain intellectual, political, and even in academia, they are disturbing. They are still disturbing. We have to say things. So the most striking example, again, was the headscarf affair, but I don't want to focus more on that. I think that you have all understand that the headscarf was the symbol around which the crisis occurred when speaking about feminism and Islam. It was around the symbol. So a certain number of questionings and a certain timidity I speak about a timidity because I remember when I interviewed the Muslim feminist women in France and Belgium, they really said that at the very beginning, they would not label them as Muslim feminists. And it was the same, I mean, with Professor Amina Wadas, for example. At the beginning, she said, I would label myself as a woman of faith. So in France and Belgium, it was the same reaction. It was, again, because of a misunderstanding of what it is to be a feminist, and it's contradictory to be feminist and Muslim. So it was the debate within the Muslim community. And women, they would say, I'm a Muslim and feminist. I'm not sure if we should speak about a feminist interpretation, for example, because I'm afraid of westernizing the scriptural sources, the interpretation of the Quran. So some women were a little bit afraid of being part of that movement that seemed to be, for some of them, too radical. Speaking about an Islamic feminist interpretation, it was too radical, and they would say, I don't want to lose myself on the westernized interpretation. So that affirmed presence of Muslim feminists within the feminist movement will trigger a theoretical questioning of the concept of feminism. On the one hand, but also a political questioning of feminist praxis in the face of new issues in multicultural context. On the other hand, it was important when we met, I say we because I was part of that movement as well, when we met with some mainstream feminist movement in France and Belgium, it was really important to deconstruct all the stereotypes and representation again that they have on Muslim women. So the feminist practice could begin by creating spaces where giving credit to the other were dialogue. And there were many, what we would call safe space today. We organized a safe space actually where giving credit to the other was important and focusing on dialogue. It was so important to reinforce the coalition and the project on the issue that would say we are struggling for the rights of women. We are not struggling for the right of wearing the headscarf. The main slogan, what we should do what we want with our own body. And if we are in coherence with the feminist values, then a woman can wear a could wear a miniskirt. At the same time, we should defend her right. That's right. But we should also defend the right of Muslim women who decided to wear the headscarf. So at the very beginning, the questioning was really about the idea of doing what you want with your own bodies. And so I think that when we have all those debates, some Muslim women, you know, the feminist movement in France was divided. You had those who would say, no, that law, we should support the law, the law on 2004, we should support it because the headscarf is oppression and we have to save those women. So it was the struggle between saving and protecting, but saving and protecting those French Muslim women was to prevent them to wear the headscarf. There were those who were saying, this is a choice. And now, I mean, there were so many sociological studies with Parad Khosrow-Kavart, with Françoise Gaspard, with Niloufer Gueulet, so many intellectual scholars here in French and Belgium who would mention in their researches that there is most of the women who wear the headscarf wear it by their own. So the feminist movement was divided between those who said, no, we have to protect them and to save them and to prevent them from wearing the headscarf, and those who would say we have to respect their choice. And this is the great majority, even if we have to recognize that there are some women who have the headscarf which is imposed. So the feminist movement was divided. Just to end, because you know I had so many points to focus on. I'm really sorry. There are so many important things to say, but let me focus just briefly on the last point, because I think this is today the most important. I ended my researches in 2015. And I continued to be involved in different dynamics of Muslim women, from the political to the field, within the civil society and in academia. And what I can say today is that today we are facing a Muslim post-feminism. This is to say that in French-speaking Europe, at the heart of the political tensions linked to the debates on the Islamic headscarf, feminist movement in France and in Belgium have been developing in recent years an in-depth analysis of the theoretical and practical basis of their movement with the aim of promoting the emergence of a feminist current that is at once anti-racist, anti-colonial, and anti-capitalist. So today we are facing a movement of women who, beyond religious reappropriation and feminist ideal, there is a desire to promote concepts that nourish the foundation of what I identify as a post-Muslim feminist movement. And it is in this context that a growing interest is emerging in English-speaking post-colonial studies and their contribution to anti-racist and anti-colonial feminism. Feminists, French Muslim feminists, see the post-colonial feminist perspective as hopeful and essential for the emergence of this decolonial feminist movement that questions the Western universalism. And in France, as in Belgium, the so-called Islamic headscarf affair has revealed on the political and intellectual level the face of a Western feminism of the second wave, whose dominant relationship due to Western superiority in the approach to questions related to the emancipation of women is strongly contested by Muslim feminists, veiled or not. I forgot to mention that those Muslim feminists are veiled or not. And when we see the debate within the Muslim community, they don't even speak now about the headscarf. It's not an issue at all. So in the recent years, some theorists and practitioners, feminist theorists and practitioners, have been increasingly stimulated intellectually by the contribution of those post-colonial theories and the concept of intersectionality. And indeed, this is the promotion of that inclusive feminist movement that can only be enriched by integrating into its research and activism a paradigm that introduces into its thinking the analysis of the intersectionality of systems of oppression. And this is in the light of this critical and constructive questioning by intellectual and feminists in the French-speaking Europe that we have certain theories and concepts that are currently being revisited with the common goal of providing plural responses to diverse needs, and particularly those of minority and marginalized Muslim feminists. So I think that the resistance and that empowerment strategies that Muslim feminists are developing are influenced by the complexity.
Dear Malika?
Yes?
Yeah, you have 1 minute to go.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I said that the Muslim feminists today. Yes. Sorry.
Can you wrap up?
Yes. Can you conclude? Yes.
Yes. Sorry. Muslim feminists in French-speaking part of Europe are no longer prisoners of the preeminence of their religious identity, which is something new, and which, according to some, polarizes and engage in the promotion of what I call a Muslim feminism 2.0 that is interested in intersectional solidarity above all. And they are more and more advocating for that inclusive and promising feminist movement that recognizes the constitutive diversity of women across ethnic, religious, racial, and gender boundaries. Sorry for being so long.
Thank you so much. This is certainly a very stimulating lecture. And the most beautiful of it is how you are speaking with so much enthusiasm and how you are giving us so many new notions. I really enjoyed it to the full. I hope the people in the audience have as well. So maybe now we can open the floor to questions or for some questions, please. Just raise your hand. Okay, Loring Danforth, please. Where are you?
There we go. Thank you very much for the really interesting presentation. I was interested in hearing you talk a little bit more about the concept of choice, whether sometimes a hijab is chosen by an individual woman to wear freedom of choice versus other occasions where it's required by law or by social pressure. And that sort of dichotomy, choice versus requirement, seems a little oversimplified, and that some scholars writing about refugees and the decision to leave home have written about a spectrum of coercion. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the range of degrees of choice versus coercion that exist, and perhaps offer some examples. Thank you.
Yeah.
You may answer.
Would you like to answer, or shall I take another question? Another two
I'm not
questions?
sure to have no, I'm not sure to have understood the question actually.
Okay.
Okay,
so Maureen, please, can you?
Yeah.
I can try again.
Yes.
Often the discussion is framed in terms of women being forced by law or social pressure to wear hijabs. On other occasions, a woman is described as free choice, individual decision, often in the context of opposing constraints, whether I'm not going to wear a hijab when it's required, or I am going to wear a hijab when there is social pressure not to. And that that framing of it is either it's choice, I do what I want, or it's required and forced by social pressure. Seems to me to be a little oversimplified, in that in many cases, it's hard to separate what I choose to do from what I have been brought up to think is the right thing to do. And so the notion of a spectrum of coercion, where there's a continuum from it's the law, you'll be punished, versus I can do whatever I want, lots of ranges in between. And I wonder if you just comment on that, or offer some examples where that might be a useful idea.
Well, I think that what we can analyze within the Muslim community, I focus on France, Belgium, because this is the area that I know the most. And when you go at the grassroots level and you ask the reason why, for example, those women wear the headscarf, there is a multiple answers, you know. And I often say that if you interview 10 women on the reason why they wear the headscarf, you will have 10 different reasons. Some will focus on the identity. Other will focus on the spiritual aspect of the headscarf. You have, you know, that new discourse on the political headscarf, which is not which is not linked to political Islam, but the discourse that now we are facing in France, for example. This is some women. I remember that I had two women who said, my headscarf is against the hegemony of France. My headscarf is anti-imperialist. So I was so astonished to have that justification, for example. But most of those I interviewed, they were really wearing the headscarf by their own after a long, as they say, spiritual introspection, and sometimes against the will of their parents, because the parents would say, no, take off the headscarf, the priority is your studies, etc., etc. Most of the women who decided to wear the headscarves, most of them was against the will of the parents, to tell you that it is really a personal choice. And now what we have to analyze and to I think that maybe there are some researchers here, but I think that a topic that has to be analyzed today, this is the movement of women who take off their hijab. You know, you have a lot of women, you know, who are visible in the social network, Instagram, TikTok, and all the social networks, who take off their hijab, and they publicly said that actually we wore the headscarf at a time we were maybe too young, and we didn't understand the very spiritual dimension of the headscarf, and now we feel that we have no need to wear the headscarf, due to our understanding as well of the scriptural sources. And we have a debate within the Muslim communities according to the verses regarding the headscarf. We have debates, and I always insist on the fact that we should have those debates within the Muslim community and between women and between Muslim women, by the way, because the headscarf issue is too politically instrumentalized, and this is a problem. So, well, this is some elements I wanted to share with you, but how would you I don't know if there are French-speaking people in the audience, but the dévoilement, how can we translate that? You know, the fact that we have more and more women who are taking out their hijab. And this is something which is questioning actually the researchers, the sociologists, and I really think that we should, some researches should be made on that phenomenon, because it questions many issues within Islam, and it opens the rooms of debate within the Muslim female community.
Thank you so much, Malika. Badur and then Joel, please. So shall we have 2 questions and then see if there's common ground between them? Joel, Badur first, please.
Hi, first of all, assalamu alaikum. Malika, thank you so much for such, honestly, an informative, beautiful lecture. I would just like to, I guess, run through what I understood from your lecture. Towards the beginning, you stated, I'm going to quote very loosely, that the Muslim feminists were rejecting borders imposed on them by the Muslim community and the civil society, speaking of the Muslim feminists that live in the West. And towards the end, you mentioned how the new, I guess, Muslim feminists are identified as anti-colonial, anti-racist, and anti-capitalist, which is something that I definitely identify as a Muslim Arab woman. I do feel though that, you know, I find myself a little bit torn how to identify myself as a Muslim woman and as a feminist, because this is the religion that I was born into, and I find myself very torn to find myself respected in my religion. However, I will say towards the very end, just now when you were answering the question, taking off versus wearing the hijab, I found this to be a very important topic that should be a personal choice that should be respected.
Yes, of course.
You know, as a woman who decides to wear the hijab to be closer to her religion or to her divinity or to her spirituality is a beautiful thing. And when she wants to take it off, it is also a beautiful thing. And I guess to sum this up, I don't want to go too long. I feel like what I understood from your lecture is really, as a Muslim feminist living in the West, you really find yourself in the middle between your Muslim community and this Western civil society. It's almost like, you know, do Muslim women need saving by Lila Abu Lughod or, you know, Chandra Talbati talking about the third world women and the Western women wanting to save the other, versus existing in this Arabic or in this Muslim society, patriarchal, let's be honest. So to sum this up, you know, how do we go about this identifying as a Muslim feminist? Thank you.
We'll take a second question, Malika, and then because we are running out of time. So we'll take the question from Joel, and then you can answer both of them. Joel, please.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for a very, very interesting lecture. I think this is very fascinating work and very important work as well. My question is about, so this sort of like revolution of gender in Islam that you're seeing, and perhaps particularly in the Francophone world, I was wondering if you also see that kind of extending to the area of not just gender, but also sexuality. In the beginning of your talk, you mentioned Amina Wadud, who I believe now identifies as non-binary and talks a lot about queer Muslims. And I know that at least in the Nordics where I live and in the UK context, it's more and more common that people don't really see this kind of dichotomy or incompatibility between being LGBTQ and being Muslim. But I'm not so familiar with the Belgian and French context. So I was wondering if you could say something about, is there a similar trend? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Malika.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those thought-provoking questions. Thank you, Badur, for your comment and your reaction. Actually, you know, we as European Muslim, and I say we because I was object of studies, but also subject. So it was, you know, it was a little bit difficult as a sociologist to focus on that identity I do belong. We were taken into hostage between those who claim for an exclusivist and literalist approach of the scriptural sources, Quran and Sunnah, and between those who claim for, as well, a literalist and exclusivist approach and understanding of the laicity and feminism. So we are as Asma Lamrabet would say, those women who are trying to open the third way between those two literalist approach within the Muslim community and within the civil society. I would say that actually, this is, you know, when you are facing difficulties and tribulation, that you are forced to stimulate yourself intellectually speaking, politically speaking, and spiritually speaking. And I would say that in 2004, when the law against the headscarf was voted, it was at that time that those women claimed for the feminist identity. It was the beginning of positioning themselves as Muslim feminists, but there was a timidity, as I said. But in 2020 and 2015, it was claiming for being feminist and Muslim with audacity and with no frustration, you know, with no frustration. It is because the contextualized, the context within which those women were proceeding imposed them and forced them to construct a discourse, a strong discourse on what is Islam, what is the situation of women within the scriptural sources, what the law said. We live in European countries, and the European court has focused, for example, on the issue of the headscarf, giving freedom of women to respecting the individual liberties, which is something that has to be respected. So it was, you know, the context which actually determined that new feminist, Muslim and feminist identity, which is, of course, I would say that the Muslim feminist in Morocco doesn't face the same challenges as the feminist, the Muslim feminist in Indonesia or in America and in France. This is why I focused my researches on France and Belgium, due to that specific relationship to religion, the specific relationship to religion, which is typically French, and which impacts Canada, Switzerland, and Belgium. As to Joël, to the question of sexuality, look, I think that the social networks are a form of empowerment. Muslim women today are empowered through social networks. You just cannot imagine the impact of TikTok, Instagram, not Facebook, but Instagram and TikTok has an important impact on the religiosity, on the socio-political mobilization, and by the way, on the fact of liberating a voice. The issue of sexuality, I would say, I'm not an expert, and I would leave to Professor Amina Wadoud, who has launched the Queer Islamic Theology Studies Center, right? Well, still, in the French-speaking part of Europe, you have that cultural approach of sexuality. But I think that thanks to the social networks, you have some women who have liberated their voices. And now this is the beginning of questioning that we have on the issue of homosexuality within Islam. You have more and more women who are asking and questioning all the queer Muslim identity. This is a new topic for us. I think that in the English-speaking part of Europe, you have all this work of Kessia Ali on sexuality, etc. This is exactly, you know, what happened with Islamic feminism, and I think this is why I decided to focus on Islamic feminism. My idea was to translate into French all that movement of women, which has to be implemented in the French-speaking part of Europe. So we are always impacted by what is happening in the English-speaking part of the world. The Francophone are impacted, and thanks to the social network, now you have some women, and you know, on Instagram with private messages, I've had a lot of Muslim women asking me, Malika, and what about the queer Muslim identity? In French, this is something new. But you know, when you focus on that topic in some conferences, it is something which is really sensitive. But I often say we should not hide ourselves from those topics. We have to face them and we have to debate. This is exactly with what happened on the issues related to the headscarf. We had to focus on that and to debate. Now on the issues related to sexuality and the queer Muslim identity, we have no choice but to debate. But for us in the French-speaking part of Europe, this is the beginning. This is the beginning of a debate, because this is a sensitive issue. And I really think that we should have more books translated in French. This is important to articulate thought-provoking arguments on the issue of sexuality and queer Muslim identity.
Thank you, Malika. We have a last question by Professor Elena Maestri. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Malika, for your lecture. It's very stimulating discussion. I just wonder about the engagement of Muslim feminists when it comes to the issue of honor killings in some immigrants communities, for instance, rights abused in these marginalized communities. I'm talking from Italy, and actually we often have to deal with this issue when it comes to some marginalized Pakistani groups and North African. How are these Muslim activists trying to engage in a way to make their ideas reach even the most marginalized Muslim women in these immigrant communities? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena, for your question. You know, we have the issue of honor killings, and we also have the issue of sexual mutilation. Yeah. All those cultural practices. Again, this is a question of interpretation. So within the Muslim community, and again, I really think that within the Muslim community, this is the task of the scholar activists and the activists from on the field, who has to create collaboration and to focus on that. You know what happened here in Brussels? I live in the heart of Europe, where we have the European institutions, and personally, I think that the European institutions are empowerment too, because they are struggling for human rights. And as a Muslim feminist, as a woman, as a human being, I want to take advantage of what they are claiming to be. You know, at the European level, they criminalized that issue. Honor killings, forced marriages, honor killings, forced marriages, and sexual mutilation. This is the three cultural practices that we are facing. And what Europe did a long time ago, they criminalized those practices. Saying, for example, to a family, or to young women, look, if your parents want to force you to marry you by force, then you have to go to the police and to claim for justice and to denounce your parents. Do you think that a Muslim children is going to denounce his parents to the police? So when we heard all those, recommendations from Europe, as Muslim women, we said, stop it. We want a collaboration, because struggling against honor killings, sexual mutilations, and forced marriages, you have to create coalition of course, social workers, educators, but also political activists, if you need feminists, but you need to associate Muslim feminists. And this is how we tackle that issue. First of all, by deconstructing the fact that this is a cultural practice. it has nothing to do with Islam. And I wrote an article on sexual mutilation that I addressed to the European institution and feminist movement and the city. And by the way, our sisters and the young children, telling them that, you know, for example, you have 6,000 young children each year who are being victims of sexual mutilation in Africa, not in France, not in Belgium, but they live in Europe, and during the summer, they are being victims of that cultural practice, right? So how are you going to deal with that? This is by raising awareness within the mosque, going and see the responsible of the mosque, asking them to organize khutbah on Friday to directly focus on the parents, because most of the parents, unfortunately, they are being victim of the cultural understanding of Islam. So if every Friday they go at the mosque and you have the imam who would say that forced marriages are forbidden, sexual mutilation are forbidden, then we can work all together, we can denounce those practices, but it's not by criminalizing and marginalizing the Muslim civil society and the Muslim intellectual that we are going to face that cultural practice. So we focused on that topic against forced marriages, honor killing, sexual mutilation, and we can have now the results at the field. We see and we feel the result by changing the mentality within the Muslim community first, but also within European institutions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Malika. There's a very last question, and thank you, Elena, for your question. Very last question in the chat. I would take it. It's from Afaf Al-Bathaina, and she says, "Do you think the time has come to speak of decolonizing feminism?"
Yes, of course. I think that, you know, and especially here in Europe, in France, you know, where the impact of colonial, you know, we are always facing feminists who still are impacted by, you know, the war in Algeria, for example. You know, sometimes I debate with some feminists and some intellectual, and I want to tell them, look, the war in Algeria is ended. Now we are French. We're not going back to our own country, and you have to act the fact that we feel as much feminist as you, and maybe more, maybe more due to all the challenges that we have to face. We have to face many challenges. We have to struggle against imperialism, against that neo-colonial mentality that some intellectuals within academia, for example, are implementing. This is why I think that we have to decolonize feminism, but I also think that we have to decolonize academia. We have to decolonize academia as well. In French-speaking part of Europe, again, I'm not an expert, but in the Francophone, you know, if you wear a hijab and you are a doctor, or it's so difficult to be recognized. So I think that we have to decolonize the mentality, feminism, academia, and time has come. I really think that calling for diversity and an inclusive feminist movement, I really think this is question of alliance, this is question of coalition. And this is why today that new movement of Muslim women, they are more focusing on the concept of intersectionality mainly than their religiosity or their identity as feminists. They think that labeling themselves as Islamic feminists can polarize the debate. This is what they answer when you ask them the question. This is why I'm speaking about a post-feminist, a post-Muslim feminist movement, or a Muslim feminism 2.0. This is women who goes beyond the religious affiliation. They say we are women and we want to struggle with all women. The issue of Muslim women is the issue of all women.
Dear Malika, this is really great points and very stimulating lecture. I would add to the decolonization part, the media. media needs also to be decolonized and to have more different women, pluralistic women representing the different sectors of spectrum of what women dress and what women look like. I would like to end here, but I'll give the floor to Zahia to announce our next lecture. We're very honored, Malika, to have you with us in this lecture, and that it has brought up so many questions and concerns, and the hearts are all over the place. So I leave it to Zahia and we hope that you stay with us in the coming lectures as well. Okay.
Thank you so much, Malika. It's really a pleasure listening to all of these views and discussions and reactions. It's really a treat, an intellectual treat. Now, the next lecture, lecture 8, is going to be given by Professor Moha Naji from FAS, affiliated to FAS University. And the title is Muslim Women Preachers, Murshidat, in Morocco as Agents of Change. The lecture will be on the 29th of March at 5 o'clock. So look forward to see you all on that date. And till then, stay well and look after yourselves. And thank you for making these events happen. Thank you.
Bye.